Please be seated. Good evening. We have a very packed agenda this evening to consider the budget for the forthcoming year. But before we start the meeting, I would like us to spare a thought for the victims of the earthquake disaster in the Middle East. It is with great sadness that we have heard the news from just 10 days ago, the terrible earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and the ever-growing list of fatalities. It is hard for many of us to imagine the devastation from these earthquakes. It must be even harder in places impacted by ongoing conflict. And the earthquake survivors are also facing freezing weather and their own cost of living crisis. I'm sure I speak for all of us saying our thoughts are with the families living in Turkey and Syria and those living in the UK who have lost family members in this tragedy. I would like us to be upstanding for 1 minute silence to think about. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. I'd like to welcome everyone to the council meeting. My name is Councillor Caroline Smith. I'm the Mayor of Wokingham and will chair this meeting. Before we start, I'd like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. A reminder that members do need to stand when speaking to the chamber. And can I also remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timings set out in the Constitution. Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence?
We have 3 apologies, Councillor Abdul Loys, Councillor Gary Cowan and Councillor Phil Cunnington, and we have Gregor Murray attending online.
Thank you. May I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. We talked to officers just before the meeting, and we've got an apology from Keith Baker as well.
Thank you very much.
And Halsall.
Okay, Councillor Andrew Mickleborough, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Before signing minutes of the previous meeting, I believe that on page 39, item 100.8, first line, the word leaflets should be replaced with leaves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. May I sign minutes with that correction? Thank you. Let's have a show of hands that we agree to the minutes of the last meeting with the amendment. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? I have. Thank you very much. I have no mayor's announcement. And going on to public question times, I have been notified there have not been any public questions submitted for the consideration of this meeting. Thank you. So I'm moving on to 107 petitions. Do we have any petitions? Thank you. Councillor Norman Jorgensen. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm presenting a petition on behalf of nearly 1,800 residents of Woking Borough. These residents wish to carry on having their rubbish collected weekly. Last summer at an executive meeting, I asked the Liberal executive member to commit to retaining weekly collections, and he declined to do so. All the noises coming from the ruling coalition group have pointed to them choosing to introduce fortnightly general and recycling waste collections, regardless of what borough residents want. Having apparently already made that decision, a consultation was then conducted in the autumn. There were over 9,000 responses, which is a good return for that type of consultation. Of those, only 24% of respondents liked the idea of moving to fortnightly waste collections. So around 2,200 people supported the proposal out of some 75,000 households in the borough. Hardly an enthusiastic endorsement. In the press release announcing the results of the consultation, the Liberal politicians state that they are pleased with the support received for moving to fortnightly collections and, despite the reality that it was actually poor support, they plan to push on. Here is yet another example of the ruling coalition group conducting a public consultation and completely ignoring the views expressed. In this case, 76% of respondents did not support a proposal to move to fortnightly collections. It's not too late, so on behalf of the majority of residents who did not support moving to less frequent waste collection, please reconsider and retain weekly collections. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to hand the petition to Priya? Thank you. Thank you. We're now moving on to 108, medium-term financial plan and associated reports. This item comprises of 4 budget reports, which will be considered together under this agenda item. The 4 reports are the Housing Revenue Account Budget 2023-24, the Capital Programme and Strategy 2023-26, the Treasury Management Strategy 2023-26, and Medium Term Financial Plan 2023-26, including the Revenues Budget Submission 2023-24. I would like to remind members that we have 1.5 hours for consideration of this item, and I understand Councillor Clive Jones is proposing these reports. Is that correct? Is there a seconder?
Yes.
Stephen Conway, thank you. And Councillor, I would like to invite to speak on the budget reports, and you have 12 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I present this prudent, forward-looking and compassionate budget to the Council, together with the circulated amended page that does not change the figures, but better represents our climate emergency endeavours. This is the first budget that the Liberal Democrats have proposed for many years, and is probably the most challenging budget process that this Council has ever experienced. With inflation at over 10%, rising demand for services, shortfalls in anticipated income, and now higher interest rates, we have had to endure a financial storm of tropical intensity. The unprecedented financial challenges have obliged us to take difficult decisions to ensure the Council's financial viability. I am pleased to say that we did not shy away from those tough decisions, and as a result of taking them, we have been able to eliminate the ongoing shortfall we inherited of 2.3 million and have now set a balanced budget for 2023-24 that plans for the future and leaves the Council's finances in a better state than we found them almost a year ago. Before I turn to some of the details of the budget, I would like to thank my executive and our corporate leadership team for the immense work that they have put into this budget. We began preparation in May when we took over the administration, and we have had to go through 3 major reviews of our capital programme to arrive at this balanced budget. I would also like to thank the Cross-Party Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which has been considering and commenting on our proposals since late summer. Moving to the key features of our budget submission. Our budget proposals include much needed substantial investment in our vital services totalling £15 million. 6.3 million is children's services and 3.6 for adult social care. In addition, we have had to provide a staggering sum to cover the costs of inflation of just under £11 million, which is £3 million more than provided for this current year. The costs of investing in services and providing for inflation are funded in part by finding just short of £12 million, primarily achieved through 10 million of cost reductions and some new income. This is the furthest that this council has gone, has had to go in many years in finding savings and possibly ever, but it is wholly necessary to meet the unavoidable financial pressures that we face. Our efficiency programme is more than double the £5.1 million proposed last year, and more than 60% of the total of the last 4 years' proposed savings. As many previous council leaders have said, we get very little from central government. My predecessors have complained that Wokingham is the poorest funded unitary authority per head of population in the country, and unfortunately their government allows this sorry state to continue. This year we received a meagre £1.8 million more from the government at a time when we have additional challenges of increased funding required for necessary statutory services and inflation totalling £26 million. Wokingham receives an incomprehensible £30 million per year less than if we were funded in the same way as the average unitary authority. This situation must not continue. Something seriously needs to change for us to get a fairer deal for the residents of Wokingham Borough. We have lobbied cabinet ministers to present our case for more money from the government, but sadly, the government is not listening. I am not alone in asking for more money. I know of council leaders from all over the country, from all parties, including Conservatives, who are complaining about being starved of cash by this government. We continue to work to reduce the number of agency staff working at the council. The previous administration started to try to address this issue, which is of course difficult as many agency staff work in adult social care and children's services area where we have significant statutory responsibilities. If this was an easy issue to resolve, the previous administrations would not have struggled to continue. They did for quite a few years. We are confident that we will be able to make savings in this area in the coming years. We have been hearing from the opposition that if we opted for elections every 4 years out of 4, there would be a saving to the council of £300,000 because there would be no saving until the elections of 2025, 2027 and 2028. And the saving would then be not £300,000 a year, but a quarter of that sum. An illustration of our responsible financial management is the significant financial contribution and ongoing towards addressing the deficit associated with rising education, health and care plans. An area known as a dedicated schools grant, where a deficit has been allowed to grow over the last 4 or 5 years under the previous administration and has now reached a magnitude of alarming proportions. This financial contribution, together with an enhanced focus by the council's leadership, will ensure that we get on top of this and avoid the council sleepwalking into a serious financial crisis. Our capital programme for the next year of just over £100 million both addresses the 14 million funding gap presented in last year's medium-term financial plan and delivers significant, much-needed capital investment to our communities, and includes investment in housing, investment in regeneration, investment in roads and transport, and includes funding for a dementia care home. As I said before, we have had to make some difficult and tough decisions. Increasing the council tax by 4.99% is one of those decisions. This has been forced on us by the government, which has made it clear that it expects councils up and down the country to do this as part of its budget package. It's a pretty well-known fact that the majority of councils across the country, Liberal Democrat, Independent, Conservative or Labour-run councillors, will increase council tax by the maximum allowed by the government. And by the way, this is also what the Conservatives have done here in Wokingham for many years. Of this 4.99% increase, 2% will be going towards the increased costs of adult social care, which David Hare will talk about, and 1% towards sorting out the problem left by the previous administration in our special educational needs. The overall budget proposal significantly enhances the financial resilience of the council, which has been achieved in the most challenging financial landscape, and demonstrates that we hold financial responsibility amongst our highest priorities. This budget invests in our community where help is needed, achieved through tenacious financial management to control and reduce spending and making difficult decisions where required. It also leaves us with an improved general fund balance of 9.3 million at the end of next year, and we will look to further strengthen this going forward. Financial rigour, financial resilience and financial responsibility is the hallmark of this budget to ensure we are in the best possible position to support those most in need. Targeting our limited resources on those who are struggling is something we regard as the right thing to do, especially in hard times. Madam Mayor, I commend this prudent, forward-looking and compassionate budget to the Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And Councillor Stephen Conway, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak?
I'll reserve my right, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I will shortly ask who else would like to speak on these items, but before I do so, I would like to invite the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, to speak to the budget reports. You have 12 minutes to speak to these reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to make it very clear to residents that this budget is the work of a coalition of Liberal Democrats, Labour and Independents. They're equally responsible for the proposals. It's a budget that's built on a falsehood which has been repeated since the Liberal Democrats took power with the help of their allies. They claim they've had no choice because the state they found the finances in. Every poor decision, that's their excuse. It's always somebody else's fault, and it's simply not true. Don't just take my word for it. At the last executive meeting, the council's own CFO said that the council's finances were in good shape under the previous Conservative administration. The CFO's report sets out that in 2020, Wokingham Borough was rated in the top 20 for financial sustainability by CIPFA. The most recent data published in 2021 shows even further improved position on indicators of financial stress, such as maintaining or improving reserves and the cost of social care as a proportion of total expenditure, compared to other authorities, demonstrating that the previous Conservative administration's stewardship of the council's finances was better than many other councils during this difficult pandemic period. Power means making choices. When they do anything at all, the record of this administration is to repeatedly make the wrong choices. Since May, the record of the coalition has been one of dither and delay. There's certainly been a lot of talk, but no action. Perhaps having been in opposition for the last 2 decades, they aren't accustomed to making difficult decisions, or maybe they're trying to duck the big issues. Having made broad sweeping promises in opposition, they find themselves incapable of acting. Councillor Jones has bet the House on being able to reduce housing numbers. He's told everybody who will listen about his brush pass with Michael Gove, and his invitation to a round table was still waiting to happen. And in the meantime, there's no sign of a local plan. We're left exposed to speculative development, endless costless appeals, and growing pressure on services and infrastructure with no plan to address it. The budget before us continues this theme of poor choices. The choices of the Liberal Democrats, propped up by Labour and Independents, are not taken in the best interests of local residents and our communities. They're driven by ideology. Take car parking charges. Despite thousands of people in this borough signing a petition begging the council not to double parking charges, and 40 businesses explaining how the charges will damage employment, the administration has pressed on. Yet this budget acknowledges this excruciating hike in charges won't save 500,000 as has been claimed, because 350,000 has been allocated to make up for the drop-off of usage of car parks and park and rides. So residents, local businesses are being made to suffer, not to save the council's finances at all, but because the administration doesn't want people to use cars. We believe that parking charges should be frozen this year to protect local business, with the rises pegged to inflation in coming years if economic circumstances support it. Then we turn to the Coalition's decision to stop weekly collection of bins. Members have heard tonight that thousands of residents have signed a petition calling for weekly collection to be retained. We know the Liberal Democrats have already made their minds up because it's included in the budget, and presumably Labour and the Independents will be whipped to fall behind them. The sad truth is that this reduction in service will not save a single penny in the coming year. Each household in the borough will see council services reduced, families with young children and the disabled will be hit worst, and we fear that fly tipping and waste dumped in litter bins will increase, all costing the council more. Worse still, the Lib Lab coalition proposed to take £2 million out of reserves to pay for this change. Had the Conservative group set this budget, we would have maintained weekly bin collections, and we would have made changes to encourage and increase recycling. We've looked at what other local authorities do, and there are significant opportunities. Which brings me to food waste carry liners. Once again, we tried to put stop to this nonsensical decision by the Lib Dems and their allies, but our pleas fell on deaf ears. As such, their budget tonight will scrap the purchase and distribution of liners for food waste caddies. We're clear we would have continued with caddy liners. We want to make it clear for residents to recycle. We want to make it easier for residents to recycle and recycle more organic matter, including pet bedding and waste, which currently fills blue bags. We Conservatives believe that people don't create waste for fun and need to be encouraged to recycle, not punished because of their circumstances. The administration could have chosen to deliver increased savings by helping people to separate their leftover food from general waste. Instead, they're making it harder for households to recycle food waste. Why? Because the Liberal Democrats, aided by Labour and Independents, want to use the money to fund their pet projects. This budget gives us an insight into where the money diverted from residents' services is going to be spent. On a citizens' assembly on climate change, even though a consultative process is already in existence, undertaking community engagement on equality and anti-poverty rather than doing something about them. Loads of talking shops and consultations, which their track record suggests they will then ignore. Increasing the number of council and committee meetings whilst hiding information and frustrating debate. These 3 items I've mentioned, car parking charges, weekly waste collection and caddy liners, will be the subject of an amendment tonight. There are areas where we've all tried to get over and over to get the administration to think again. I say to Liberal Democrat, Labour and Independent members, this is your last chance to listen to residents and do the right thing. You know we've got 7,700 signatures so far, and there are a lot more people that agree with us. Other Conservative members will highlight different areas where we would act differently had we set the budget. We would like to have produced a fully comprehensive alternative budget, but unlike the administration, we didn't have many months of preparation supported by hundreds of officers. I would, however, like to publicly thank the CFO and senior officers for their help and input. They've been really, really helpful to us. As such, we'll highlight areas where we think funding could increase or decrease in order to achieve a balanced budget, with a clear caveat that we don't have the detailed figures that the administration has. The situation should be very familiar to the Liberal Democrats. It's exactly what they did over a number of years, including last year when they replied to the budget. One of the Liberal Democrats' first Act on taking office was to reject moving to full council elections, as we've just heard. Instead of the current system, by election by thirds, despite all-out elections being what residents wanted, and despite the Electoral Commission advising the elections by thirds lead to a low turnout, and that elections are fairer and more equitable if they're all out. But also despite officers, and not us, officers, estimating it would save the council 4 million over a 4-year period. Is that the action of administration facing difficult financial decisions? I don't think so. Madam Mayor, what the Liberal Democrats are offering to residents tonight is less for more. Bins will be collected less often. Projects such as the solar farm to generate an income have been significantly delayed. Burhunt School expansion is at risk. A real terms cut in road maintenance and no progress on housing numbers or the local plan. And in return, people will pay more council tax, higher fees and increased charges. When the residents made the decision to leave this council with no overall control last May, they signalled they wanted something different. We accept that. But almost 10 months on, it's become increasingly clear to local people that the Liberal Democrat-led experiment has not only failed, it's one they can ill afford. The Liberals did not put these changes in the manifesto they were elected on. I say to all people who don't like increased charges, worse road maintenance and worse services, when you next get a chance to vote, before you put the X in the box, ask yourself, what are the Liberals planning that they do not dare tell us about? If you refuse to listen to the residents and disregard their views, if you put up fees and charges but reduce services, if you fail to act on planning and put the whole borough at risk, why should residents trust you? The residents of Woking Borough deserve better. They deserve an administration that will invest in services, not cut them. They deserve to have the taxes and charges kept at the level they can afford. They deserve to have a council leader who will actually cut housing numbers and plan for future development, not just talk about it or kick it down the road. They deserve to have a council that will deliver on local communities' priorities, not the latest ideological fad of a group of councillors. And the best way for people to get a council that will truly be on their side is to return a Conservative administration at this May's local elections.
Hello, Councillor Munro.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment, which I think we could just circulate.
Do you have a seconder?
Yes.
Thank you.
No.
Councillor Kerr?
Thank you. Under 4.2.13.12A of the Constitution, can I request that we have a 15-minute adjournment so we can actually look at this, please?
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Can we all vote on having a 15-minute adjournment, please? Thank you very much. The clock stops now. 15 minutes. Thank you. back so prompt. We will now continue. Councillor Jones, do you accept the amendment?
Oh, no, certainly not.
Okay, does anybody wish to speak on the amendment? Please raise your hands, please. Keep your hands raised. Thank you very much. I'm going to allow half an hour for this part of the amendment. Thank you very much. And our first speaker is Ian Shenton, please.
That's good. Good.
Sorry, can the proposer please speak, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose the amendment showing where the Conservatives would make savings and reallocate money. This, in my opinion, is a prudent proposal, and it's what our residents want, very importantly. We've found savings of 2.1 million from reductions in wasteful, increasing spending on back office staff and too much focus on communications, on projects no longer progressing, and removing expensive interim posts, removing some allocation of funds for growth under the Chief Executive and resources, and save a staggering 341,000 communications. A frankly bizarre spending increase when the administration displays total apathy for the views of the residents, flatly ignoring the results of consultations such as set out at elections or at elections. We found that over 2 million without full access to all the figures on officers, which begs the question, do the administration even understand the detail of the document that you're presenting? We reallocate money to freeze parking charges, increase spending on road maintenance, and keep weekly waste collection, and still have 600,000 left over. Previous Conservative administrations have built up more than 100 million of available reserves, but last month, Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubay suggested the council was losing financial stability because Conservatives had drawn money from reserves. Yet the report she was speaking on said the council was working over many years on the highest standards of financial management. And the irony is that the Lib Dems are taking 2 billion out of revenue reserves inherited from previous Conservative administration, which Lib Dems had previously said was inadequate. It was very good of Councillor Shepherd-Dubay to confirm that she's taking the council down the road, as she put it, what people call bankruptcy. The Lib Dems budget, which no doubt will be loyally supported by Labour, fails its own test of sound finance and fails to address the wants and needs of the residents. It lacks the ambition to continue the Conservative goal of getting the local economy back on its feet after COVID. It wastes money on internal reorganisation while cutting back and underinvesting on services that affect our communities, like roads and waste. And it takes more money out of residents' pockets that would have been found from better financial management. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. It's normal, I think, or traditional to allow the seconder to speak if he wishes first.
Okay, the seconder, would he like to reserve his right to speak now or speak later?
I'd like to reserve my right, Madam Mayor, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ian Shenton, please.
Third time lucky, Madam Mayor.
The move to bi-weekly waste collection will save no money for many years, if ever, says the leader of the opposition in Wokingham today. Wow. Just wow. Allow me to refer you to page 64 of the medium-term financial plan, or page 223 of the agenda pack. There is no effect on 2023-24 of our proposal, but from 24-25 onwards, I quote, cease the provision of residual waste blue bags, saving £350,000. Proposal to move to alternate weekly or 3-weekly residual waste collections, saving £700,000. That's over £1 million a year that you are happy to throw away. Do you think for 1 minute that our Section 151 officer and the rest of the leadership team would allow that to be in there if it were not achievable? With that one sentence, you have demonstrated with abundant clarity why your party is not qualified to run this council and why your amendment tonight is so much hot air.
Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If the Conservatives were really serious about their mini budget this evening, they would have shared it with members in advance for consideration, asking members to vote on proposals that we've only just seen.
Point of personal
It's not about you. I haven't referenced you, so I don't think you can do that.
I think it is.
Councillor Jorgensen, your point of order?
My point of order is a point of personal explanation under.
I haven't mentioned your name.
You pointed at me.
I didn't point. I don't.
Excuse me.
I don't point in the chat. Thanks.
So your point of order, or
Yes, my point of order is a point of personal explanation under 4.3.13.14.
and it is?
The point is that under previous amendments to budgets, they have always been distributed during the council meeting, not in advance.
Okay. Can I carry on? That's not been done by the Labour group, so I'm still entitled.
Excuse me, sorry,
being
that's
done.
not material to this debate.
Okay, shall I carry on?
Yes, please.
Asking members to vote on proposals that have not been through scrutiny, that we haven't had a chance to talk to officers about, is just unrealistic. They cannot seriously expect us to just vote this through on the hoof, and there are clearly shades of our old friend, the magic money tree, in these figures, but especially when the CFO states the proposals would add substantial risk to a budget that already contains considerable risks. We can't support it.
Councillor David Davis, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Coalition's budget presents a number of grave concerns that are a mix of ideological, naive or ill-judged, and I commend the work that's been done in short order by this opposition to provide an alternative budget, something the current administrations often fail to do during their time in opposition, failing to say why their way was better, just not that. Well, not us. We have a plan. To that plan, and regarding car parking fees, we've been repeatedly challenged by the member to my right, or is it to my left, to commit to reverse the catastrophic increases proposed by this coalition. And we've said, wait for our budget. Well, here it is, an email commitment to not increase charges, to not extend durations for charging, and to not increase the range of car parks being charged. So I hope he's happy. When I lost my seat on the town council, I continued to help the local community, and with a small group set up restoring the Wokingham Business Association. Through them and through COVID, we worked to support businesses and traders to drive footfall, help all businesses, and these changes reverse all that good work they have done post-COVID to build back. Previously, I gladly spoke, as did Councillor Conway, against proposed increases in car parking charges. They were ill-judged, had not sought adequate consultation, will present a grave risk to local traders in the middle of an economic downturn. The same is true now, and yet worse is now being proposed. I'm therefore delighted to speak to our amendment to stop this increase in charges, to stop the increase in scope, to stop the increase in time that our constituents will have to pay for parking, including removal of the free parking at Leisure Centre, when I thought we were supposed to be encouraging the use of that amenity. It's as if the ruling coalition do not understand that if you double the price of something, it does not double its value. You drive the heart out of our towns, disproportionately affecting those with the least, and drive those with the most to Reading, Bracknell or London. You provide no proper modelling of use and second-guess the impact by adding in a throwaway £350,000 from reduced use in such straitened times. Well, if you don't care about the impact this increase has on our visitors to our town, I do. We do. If you don't care about the impact on footfall on our shops and traders, we do. If you don't care, your increases will in all likelihood lower revenue, then we do. And if you don't care about the businesses that will close their doors because of your decisions, then we do, and so should you all. We present here a balanced budget that reflects the reality of the world and supports local businesses to thrive in extraordinary times. A very conservative thing to do, but surely the right thing to do. And I wonder why the coalition choose not to. I commend all of these amendments to the council, especially regarding car parking charges, and implore you all to support this amendment.
Councillor Paul Bishwick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pauline Jorgensen and David Davis have referenced the 500,000 additional income in their speeches. They're shown.
Points of clarification? I have not referenced 500.
Sorry, what was your point?
Point of personal clarification. I have not referenced £500,000 in any of my speeches.
What was your point of order?
It's a point of personal clarification. 4.2.13.15. Point of explanation, sorry. I've not referenced £500,000 in my speech in any way, shape or form.
It's not material. Councillor Paul Bishwick, will you please? Councillor Paul Bishwick, please continue.
The 500,000 is shown on page 220, but incorrectly deducted 350,000 shown on page 218 to make the 150,000. The 350,000 is required to make up the shortfall, yes, the shortfall in the budget over the year. If we had not proposed to raise the car parking charges, then the 350,000 would increase by 500,000 to 850,000 of additional funding, which would need to fund vital or cutting vital services. Cutting vital services. All of this was detailed at the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 26th of October 2022, which Pauline, you attended.
Councillor Andy Croy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you guys would like to get your points of order in now. No? Okay, good. I would like to congratulate whoever it was spent a few hours learning Excel. Well done, it's great. It's a shame you didn't actually get your heads around the budget. It's a very, very brave claim from Stuart that the Lib Dems don't understand the detail. Looking at this, what this does confirm is that Trussonomics is not dead yet. It's risen from the grave. It's risen from the grave. It stalks the streets and neighbourhoods of Wokingham and assembles over here on my left every few weeks to taunt us with its idiocy. I wasn't going to make a speech. I will summarise by finishing up by quoting the CFO. You'll all remember, of course, Truss's first act as Prime Minister was to sack the Chief Financial Advisor to the Treasury. Close your mouths when you're looking at me, guys. You won't look so foolish. She sacked him because she knew his advice would tell her plan was mad. Luckily, you guys haven't been able to do that here. And I will quote from our equivalent. I can, however, conclude that the proposals, your proposals, would add substantial risk for the reasons set out above to a substantive budget proposal that already contains considerable risks and challenges. You're not to be trusted with the country's money. You're not to be trusted with residents' money, and we will not be backing this.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Conservatives would retain the weekly waste collection service so that residents have a choice about how they dispose of waste. I'll repeat a little bit of what I said earlier. The Liberal Labour coalition carried out a consultation on the proposed changes to waste collection in the autumn, and only 24% of respondents, around 2,200 people out of the population of 160,000, liked the idea of fortnightly waste collection. That is, 76% of people did not like the idea. Yet the Liberal executive planned to push on once again ignoring the express view of residents of the borough. The Conservatives are pleased to have significantly increased recycling while we controlled the council. This was achieved through the introduction of improved services, such as extending the range of plastics, introducing the food waste service, and the sealable green recycling bags. All of this resulted in a recycling rate of 55%. Our target now is to increase the recycling rate to 70%. We plan to achieve this by making it easier to recycle, by extending the range of materials that can be recycled, for example, pet waste, and by encouraging residents to adopt recycling to a greater extent. There's plenty of scope because more than half of current blue bag waste could be recycled. Achieving such a recycling rate will result in millions of pounds of savings. The Conservative group disagreed with the Liberal Labour coalition decision last summer to scrap the provision of food waste caddy liners. We feel this is counterproductive and is discouraging residents from recycling food waste. There was a target in this year's budget of saving £350,000 from diverting food waste from blue bags to the food waste recycling. I haven't seen these savings being realised, and this is at least partly due to the withdrawal of the provision of caddy liners. The Conservatives would reintroduce the provision of food waste caddy liners, making them available for collection by residents in council buildings and libraries. The Conservatives would continue the policy of providing excellent sport and leisure facilities across the borough, where possible, making these pay for themselves and generate income streams for the council to help keep council tax down. For example, I frequently cycle through Dinton Pastures, and it's great to see it well used throughout the year. The latest major facility to open was the Carnival Hub. This is a great new facility and was a culmination of a project over many years and hard work by many people. Part of the redevelopment around Elms Field, a programme vehemently opposed by the Liberals. In the future, we will build a new pool in Arborfield. Thank you.
Councillor Maria G, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let us be clear about the reason why my colleagues on the executive are working so hard to manage their respective responsibilities. We are in an economic desert created by a rash and self-serving Conservative government. The proposed unamended budget increases council tax by 1% for children's services and 2% for adult social care. That leaves a general increase of 1.99% to cover everything else, when inflation is running at just over 10%. The financial mismanagement at national level that has led us to this position is due partly to the biggest act of self-harm ever inflicted by a government on its people, a hard Brexit, and a proposed tax cutting but completely unfunded autumn budget that spooked the financial markets and crashed the economy. The consequent cost of living crisis and raised interest rates on mortgages and rents are causing misery for millions. Executive members are also having to deal with local Conservative mismanagement that led to an inherited unfunded capital programme and a DSG budget that requires action to bring it back in control. No dithering delay from this administration. The Conservative government values the highest earning over the just about getting bys, those on low incomes and vulnerable communities. They would rather cut income taxes for the highest earners and keep non-dom status for the extremely rich than look after nurses and fund local councils properly. By way of comparison, here we have level-headed councillors ready to vote for a thorough, balanced and compassionate budget that was available for all to examine and question before this evening. Our Conservative borough councillors don't put their plans before proper scrutiny because they lack credibility. In places, the amendments are just plain wrong. The opposition have learned from their MPs and governments to avoid looking hard at consequences. They don't understand that budgets are not just a bunch of numbers, but rather plans to achieve strategic aims. The opposition have no strategy. These changes are a desperate attempt to make themselves relevant. We should reject the amendments. Why? Not just because the changes are half-baked rather than oven-ready, but because there were many opportunities to put forward credible alternative budget items before this evening. The Conservatives cannot bleat now and say they don't like what officers have put together and scrutiny committees have approved. Too late.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dupre, please.
Imogen Shepherd-Dupre. Well, I'm looking at this report, it raises many questions. If the Conservatives were serious about presenting alternatives to the budget, then why did they wait to the last minute to present this? You cannot change one thing without wholly understanding the consequences, which is why we have a scrutiny process, with scrutiny committees and that all of our councillors, including the Conservatives, are part of. That is the place to present alternative ideas and allow committees to examine their potential. If you did, then for a good reason, probably. The budget we have presented in our reports has been reviewed over many months, so we can be sure we have got it right. What scrutiny has this alternative budget been through? If the Conservatives were capable of producing a credible budget, then they had ample opportunity to do so before this meeting. Looking at this, it looks like, I don't see how this could be delivered, and it looks like, yet again, you're planning on pulling from the reserves. The last two paragraphs of our S151 officer's report, our Chief Financial Officer, pretty much say it all here. Given the short time for consideration, it has not been possible to properly understand how the number of other savings put forward would be achieved. The single most sizable deletion of this deletion of the 350k growth in relation to car parking service area. There are also some savings in the budget amendment appear to either relate to special items or are not currently included in the base budget. This will have the effect of adding to the budget gap for ongoing funding in 24-25 if the growth items in the budget amendment are required to continue as expenditure and INCI return. It says it all. Amendment proposals in themselves make the Council's financial position unsafe. I can, however, conclude that they would be at a substantial risk. It is on this basis, this is not credible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. If this is the best that the opposition can do, they're in an even worse state than I imagined. Just read the Chief Finance Officer's report and inwardly digest. I must confess to be surprised by an amendment that displays a shocking lack of understanding of the financial challenges the Council faces. Their amendment, as my colleagues have already shown, is based on inaccurate assumptions and false figures. The Conservatives propose to forego savings and income generation without a plausible explanation of how they will make up the shortfall. The Conservative Party nationally have lost all financial credibility thanks to the disastrous Truss Kwarteng budget, and the Conservatives locally seem determined to follow in their footsteps. They pin their hopes on abolishing a citizens' assembly, that it's not in the budget, oh no, it's not, and they pin their hopes also on making savings in interim staff. Yet they ran the council for the last 20 years and made no such savings. Why should we believe they're going to make them now? We've made savings and generated extra income in the place and growth budget to protect children's and adult services. Are the opposition proposing to protect the place and growth budget and make savings in children's and adult services? If they are, their priorities are certainly not ours. Our budget seeks to target help on those who most need it. Their amendment suggests they are less concerned about those who are experiencing hardship. Our budget, I should add, as other speakers have already said, has gone through a rigorous process of scrutiny since last autumn. Their amendment, though trailed in this week's Wokingham Today, is presented to us only now, in the council chamber, this evening. It deserves to be rejected by all councillors who believe in sound finance and focusing help in these tough times on those who need it most.
Councillor Charles McGetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Conservative approach to the budget will be very different to the Coalition. Since May 2022, there's been a continual process of cuts to universal services which the Council delivers and every resident uses. We think the main purpose of the Council is to provide key universal services for residents and that this approach is wrong. If the voters of Wokingham vote Conservative in May 23, they will see a programme to restore these services and bring all back to normal. We think it is fundamentally wrong to double most car parking charges and introduce evening and weekend charges at a time when people are struggling. These charges will see a resident commuting from Finchampstead to Wokingham 5 days a week spend almost £2,000 in additional car parking charges a year. We will scrap this scheme. Car parking charges will rise by inflation only from next year. The choice in May 23 will be lower charges and costs under a Conservative administration or more stealth taxes. The Coalition is pledging to freeze all highways and pavement maintenance budget in real terms. With inflation running at 10%, this is a real terms cut in maintenance. This means more potholes, bad road surfaces and bad pavements. A Conservative administration would increase this budget and deliver better road surfaces and less potholes for May 23. The Coalition has already pledged to cut weekly waste collections. We would keep this key service, which is so vital to many residents. We believe residents should have alternative transport choices apart from the car. We will continue to financially support local buses as they are now, but will more actively promote and market the routes to encourage usage. We would promote them via innovative schemes to increase usage as have been used in West Berkshire. We would continue to invest in cycleways and greenways across the borough. Rather than spending a lot of money and time developing schemes next to main roads, we would develop on the success of the Greenway programme with separate cycleways which can be delivered quicker and for less money per scheme. This programme has delivered results. I note the budget has no funding for greenways past 23-24. We will do more than talk. We'll actually just get on with it and deliver it. You've heard the leader of the council tonight speak about the cost of the living crisis, and I agree with him. It is a difficult time for all of our residents. We believe it is wrong to spend £1.2 million developing new cycling schemes under the next phase of the LC Whip at a time when people are struggling. We will focus this money on delivery rather than developing speculative design proposals, which may or may not attract funding. We would also look for more efficiency within the council. Under the previous Conservative administration, the council went through efficiency programmes such as the 21st Century Council. When I was responsible for adult services, we saved millions and improved service with programmes such as the Empowered Demand Management Programme. Local business at times when the economy is tough has to strive for greater efficiency and do more with less. The council's aim should be equally as ambitious. There is a clear choice tonight, a Conservative proposal which focuses on lower tax, inflation-only rises in key charges and restoration of key charges or something different. In response, basically, to several of the points that have been made.
Sorry, Councillor Margetts, you're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Why have the Conservatives handed us this amendment this evening? Why haven't they put these thoughts to councillors with more notice? Why didn't they put these thoughts before the cross-party corporate and community overview and scrutiny committee, who have been looking at our proposals since the late summer? Why have they given us only 15 minutes to consider these proposals this evening? Why are 5 of their colleagues missing tonight?
Sorry, Councillor Jones, please can we be quiet? Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, they can't have much confidence in their ideas, can they? Pauline Jorgensen complained that they hadn't had officer time to look at the finances. Did you ask for officer time? I'm sure that you would have got it.
I did.
If you probably only asked for it recently, Pauline, you could have asked for it ages ago. I would suspect you haven't. This is not the serious alternative budget that we were promised by the opposition. It's an attempt to grab a few headlines in next week's paper and a few headlines in the very few out of touch Conservative leaflets that they still deliver. It's clear that they really haven't thought about this. You only have to read the CFO's report to understand that. The message that this amendment is sending very clearly to the residents of Wokingham is don't let these Conservatives anywhere near our finances again. We have no choice but to reject this ill thought out amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. We'll now go to voting on the amendment. This will be a recorded vote. Thank you.
For or against the amendment?
Sorry, does the proposer have a right to reply?
Sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Sam Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Barry Bath. Parry Bath.
Yes, Madam, it's Parry Bath. I'm voting for.
Councillor Rachel Bishopforth.
Against.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal.
For.
Councillor Chris Bowring.
For.
Councillor Shirley Boyt.
Against.
Councillor Prue Bray.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Anne Chadwick.
For.
Councillor Stephen Conway.
Against.
Councillor David Cornish.
Against.
Councillor Andy Croy. Councillor David Davis.
For.
Councillor Peter Dennis.
Against.
Councillor Lindsay Ferris.
Against.
Councillor Michael Firmager.
For.
Councillor Paul Fishwick.
Against.
Councillor Jim Fruin.
Against.
Councillor Maria G.
Against.
Councillor David Hare.
Against.
Councillor Peter Harper.
For.
Councillor Pauline Hallier-Simons.
For.
Councillor Graham Howe.
For.
Councillor Chris Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Against.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor John Kaiser. Councillor Sarah Kerr.
Against.
Councillor Tahir Meher.
Against.
Councillor Morag Malvern.
Against.
Councillor Charles McGetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts.
For.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Mickleby.
Against.
Councillor Stuart Monroe.
For.
Councillor Alistair Neal.
Against.
Councillor Jackie Rance.
For.
Councillor Beth Rowland.
Against.
Councillor Ian Shenton.
Against.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
Against.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
Against.
Councillor Mike Smith.
Against.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
For.
Councillor Bill Soane.
For.
Councillor Alison Swaddle.
For.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
For.
The amendment falls.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We're now moving on to the original debate, and I would like members to be mindful of the usual rules of debate. You're permitted to speak for 3 minutes. Please, can you indicate by a show of hands, please? Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can I propose under 4212M to suspend Standing Order 4221 to allow the debate on the budget to be extended by 30 minutes? Because there's a lot of people wanting to speak and we're quite a long way through the time already.
Do you have a seconder?
I do.
Would we like to have a show of hands now to continue the debate?
Yep.
And then go back to
Extend.
extend. This is to extend the meeting, part of the meeting by half an hour. Thank you. But keep your hands up if you wish to speak as well. Thank you. Thank you very much. First speaker, Councillor Graham Howe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're pleased to see that the Liberal Democrats have more or less adopted the budget and activities put in place by the previous Conservative administration in relation to children's services. The investment in SEND services is statutory, and the improvements put in place by the Conservative administration were supported and continue to be supported by the Liberal Democrats, including the platform that we put in place and a difficult task in continuing to approach the DSG problem. However, on the standard education side, we have a number of maintained schools, which means that the borough is responsible for the fabric of those schools. In the medium-term financial plan put forward by the Conservative administration a year ago, excuse me, there was a line item of £400,000 put by specifically to engage surveyors to report on the fabric of those schools and what it would take to bring them into the latter part of the 21st century. This is a real life problem, and although politically unpalatable, has to be faced. However, when I asked the executive member as to where the money had gone earlier in the financial year and the activity that went with it, I was told that the money had been spent elsewhere without specification. That means that the borough has a number of school buildings where we have no idea what the problems are and what the cost of those solutions. Schools, both maintained and academies, have been crying out for help to put the budget for activity by, and this is what we had prepared. Under the Conservative administration, we would have made an assessment and had a plan. Look at what we did with the onset of the Year 7 placements and sixth form provision in the south of the borough. We faced up, brought it to council, and was grateful for the Liberal Democrats' support. The budget presented today makes no provision for the renovation of maintained schools. So there are Liberal Democrats shirking the issue, hoping that it will be picked up by Academy Trust sometime between now and 2030. What about the conditions now? In the meantime, our pupils, who are our children, not the Academy's children, they're our children, and the teaching staff in those schools suffer leaking roofs and poor buildings. The Liberal Democrats have abandoned the opportunity to understand the size and scope of this not insignificant problem, and it demonstrates a lack of vision and an inability to manage money addressing those issues. I wonder where else the Liberal Democrats have avoided the real issues in favour of the vanity projects.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubé.
Good evening, everybody. Last year, we inherited what was described as a supposedly sound budget, but it came with big gaps and did not cover the shortfall from the Winner's Park and Ride. It did not tackle the problems in children's services, and it did not plan for the fact that we no longer had the expected pre-COVID income levels from many of our services. It was not bad luck alone. If that was not bad luck alone, war broke out in Europe, causing food and fuel prices to rise across the world, meaning that inflation currently stands at around 10.1% here in the UK. These inflationary pressures are not only impacting our residents, but they are also impacting this council too. However, along with our officers, we have been able to produce a balanced budget. I applaud them for their work and those who had to part their ideas and ambitions to get us past this hurdle. You know who you are, and I thank you. Despite the problems mentioned, this budget will not pull funding from the general fund reserves, as has happened before under the previous administration. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy is very clear. Reserves should not be used to pay for day-to-day expenditure and should not be used in all but the most exceptional circumstances. They should not be used to fund a budget shortfall either, without having a plan in place to address the underlying deficit. We have had to make difficult decisions this year, but it's better to have a safe and sensible budget rather than one that is open to risks in the uncertain times. Our senior leadership team of officers, following government recommendations, have also reviewed the earmark reserves and released a small amount of funding for use in the general fund. This will help us repair the deficit left by in our general fund reserves by the previous administration. Before you all get too excited, let me be clear. There is no magic money tree to be found in our reserves. Earmarked means the funding is allocated for use for a particular project, a contract or function, and it is needed to protect our residents. Only our technical and statutory officers can really judge what earmark reserves we need. But in the interest of openness, we will be bringing them to corporate community overview and scrutiny so everyone can see that they are being used wisely. While not yet reflected in our reporting, we intend to be building reserves to 9 million during the final part of the year, restoring them to what was agreed to be a safe level, providing stability and security. Our budget for the next year shows predicted savings and efficiencies income generation of 11.8 million, bringing this council around to a much better and safer position. I'm also pleased to say that we have also been able to provide an extra support for residents on the lowest incomes. We are extending our council tax reduction scheme by another £100,000 and we have provided an extra £250,000 of additional help. Finally, I would like to talk about our capital programme. We have had to reprofile and reduce some projects as we do not have the funding to cover everything that was proposed. We have done much work within our means as a financially responsible party, keeping the levels of borrowing under control. It is on that note I will say yes, we still have very much more to do. Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I would like to thank the officers for the many, many hours of hard work that have gone into producing these budget documents. Taking into account the pandemic, the impact of Brexit, the effect of the war on Ukraine, and of course, most recently, the cost of living crisis, this is one of the toughest budgets the council has ever faced. Unlike most councils up and down the country, this council is having to weather an extremely turbulent storm. This storm is set within a backdrop of years and years of little and often zero revenue support grant from central government. Conservative government failure shows clearly across this budget. The council's net expenditure budget has reduced by a whopping 50%, or £53 million in real terms, since 2010, the year Conservative austerity began. For this year's budget, the council have had to more than double the level of savings of recent years, and those years were already very challenging. 57% of our budget is spent on adult social care and children's services. Many in our borough are lucky not to have to need these services, but they're absolutely vital for those who do. That's why the council is having to make such difficult decisions in order to balance the books and protect these vital services. For example, to stop buying food waste bags on residents' behalf, or to increase car parking charges for the first time in 5 years. How much money would the council have saved if the Conservatives had started to gradually introduce these changes years ago? What greater spending power would the council have had for those vital services? Perhaps more worryingly, in the detail, we can see reductions in these vital services, a reduction, for example, in adult social care placement costs, the removal of on-site care for those with low care needs. We welcome the additional £250,000 budget allocated to those who are most vulnerable in our borough through council tax relief and other measures. But it saddens me greatly that the council have had to resort recently to a crowdfunding campaign to help those struggling this winter, such as the utter inadequacy of government funding. The 6th biggest economy in the world, and our councils are having to resort to crowdfunding for ordinary people who can't afford to feed their families. It was unavoidable that the council would have to raise council tax. In reality, there is no choice. But council tax rises are not the solution to the long-term pressures facing councils like Wokingham. And residents shouldn't have to pay for Conservative incompetence, by which I mean both the previous administration here and our government. It's time the Conservative government backed local authorities rather than starving them of funds and removed the need for this additional tax burden for our council taxpayers at a time when the cost of living crisis is making many people's lives extremely hard. In the Labour group, this is not our budget, contrary to what was suggested earlier, and it is not the kind of budget that any council should be faced with. But in the context of these extremely difficult financial challenges, we understand that a budget has to be set, and we will therefore reluctantly support it.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Swaddle, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking against this budget tonight as one of Woodley's borough councillors because of the very strong depth of feeling in our town against increasing parking charges. 4,238 residents across the borough signed the Conservative petition calling for a halt to these punitive charges. Many of the residents were from Woodley. In addition, the businesses in Woodley are highly alarmed by the coalition's plan to go forward with their controversial parking charge increases. 40 Woodley Town Centre businesses signed a letter to the newspaper expressing their serious concerns, and they have a strong argument that this proposal, which has no business case to support it, will have a severe impact on their businesses. The success of business relies on three things. Firstly, their costs. Secondly, local residents' ability to spend. And thirdly, the competition. It is indeed unfortunate, or perhaps I would say unwise, or even neglectful, that the coalition leading the administration at the council did not ensure officers consulted any local businesses before publishing their plans. Residents and businesses are in unprecedented times financially, as referred to by both Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bay and Councillor Burgess. The energy crisis impacts everyone and significantly adds to the costs of any business's operations. Costs of products and supplies are increasing, and in some cases by much more than inflation. Many of the Woodley Precinct employees will struggle to afford the cost of parking to come to work. At the same time, customers are also suffering, meaning a massive squeeze on the money left each month to spend in local businesses. So on one hand, costs are increasing dramatically for local businesses, and on the other hand, customers have less to spend. Unsurprisingly, increasing car park charges will massively eat into our customers' ability to spend. The final side of the triangle is competition, i.e. choice for residents. When your ability to spend is squeezed, you'll look at lower cost options to get goods and services. And the cost of parking is a starting point to lower your costs. Residents may turn to online shopping, or they may shift to use businesses with free car parking, especially so in the hospitality sector. Woodley residents have been delighted by the expanding range of restaurants and cafes in the precinct and being able to enjoy these in the evenings, Sundays and bank holidays when there's been no charge for parking. Woodley businesses and residents have urged the council to reconsider these increases because the council should be doing all it can to help local businesses survive in difficult financial times. Yet here we are tonight with a budget featuring increasing parking charges with no business case to demonstrate that parking levels will be unaffected by huge increases, and a lack of transparency that the real problem lies with the park and ride car parks. It seems that when the Lib Dems tell you they listen, that they're transparent, they want to consult and partner with residents. It's just talk. They don't listen, they don't consult, and they don't publish business cases.
Excuse me, Councillor Swaddle, sorry.
I've just finished. Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My portfolio covers equalities, inclusion and fighting poverty, and I want to say a few words about each of these areas as well as about the contribution of the Human Resources Department. The cost of living crisis is a desperate emergency for some of our residents living in this borough. Many of these people have previously been able to manage financially, but are now struggling due to spiralling inflation, utility bills and food prices. Many residents on the lowest incomes cannot increase them because they are retired or because of caring responsibilities or disability. It is therefore right that the council is doing all that we can do to help residents who are struggling financially during this very difficult time. Children in low-income families are particularly vulnerable. We know that living in poverty during your formative years can deeply affect health and education, which in turn can have a lifelong impact. I am very proud, therefore, that the Council committed to funding meals in the school holidays for the very lowest income families who rely on free school meals in term time. In addition to this, we have increased the council tax reduction scheme to support more residents and identified a further £250,000 for initiatives to help residents deal with the cost of living crisis. A cross-party working group is engaging with officers and members of our voluntary and community sector to identify how we can use this money to best support our residents in the year ahead. This in addition to the support that the council gives with discretionary housing payments, emergency grants and welfare support. We are running a pilot scheme referring residents in council tax arrears to the Citizen Advice Bureau for help with tackling the underlying problems linked to debt. This reflects our commitment to support residents in dealing with issues in a way which leaves them better equipped to deal with the challenges in the longer term. To support residents, we are continuing to work in an innovative and successful partnership with voluntary and community sector organisations via the Hardship Alliance and the Hardship Alliance Action Group. This provides powerful links to the communities which need us the most. We've also invested in community engagement resource to provide us with an understanding of how we can fight poverty and tackle inequality in Wokingham. Turning to the Human Resources Department, we need a strong team of officers to provide services to our residents. We have invested in our Human Resources team so that they can recruit and retain the staff we need. For example, we have recently engaged a new officer who will be able to take on more recruitment in-house, saving on agency fees in the longer term. We can see from the latest census how the borough has become more diverse, and we need to make sure that we understand and are serving all our residents. I want to close by mentioning the excellent equality impact assessment which came with the medium-term financial plan. This is an extremely thorough and well thought out document, a huge improvement on many previous equality impact assessments. It looks at how changes which we're making in the borough will affect our diverse residents, including on those living on lower incomes, to ensure that we are not unduly affecting them. This reflects Wokingham Borough Council's commitment to being a leader in promoting equality and inclusion here in Wokingham. And I want to say thank you very much to the officer team who were involved in the work on this.
Sorry, you're out of time. Thank you. Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to talk about the extra £500,000, £250,000 that has been budgeted for to help those on a low income. This is well-meaning, but well-meaning is not the same as well-managed. It came to light at the cross-party working group last week with charities that there's no clarity on what issue this fund is trying to solve. There was no direction, no plan. We were told, what do you feel like this should be spent on? And this approach is all wrong. The figure has been plucked from the sky, and this is local council taxpayers' money that is being used to fund it. It was Councillor Shahid Yunus that had to press to say that we can't just on a whim say what we want to prioritise. We need data and evidence to direct and show the demand. And this was taken on board, and I am grateful for that. But it does betray that there was very little thought that went into this before. And I know it'd be packaged up as consulting with charities and councillors in early days, but it felt very much like a tick box exercise. And surely you need to evidence what the demand is and the specific issue you're trying to solve before justifying such a sum of money. The Conservatives would not be dishing out £250,000 with no evidence-backed direction or demand. We would put this sum back in the pockets of our local taxpayers. We would get the officers to look at the data, including a lot of the data a lot of money has been spent on to collect, and intelligence from the local charities to see what actually are we trying to solve? What can't be solved with the £1 million household support fund that we're soon going to have, and all the other hardship funds that we've got to our availability. And it was the charities in this meeting that said that provision locally for people struggling is good, and the council should look at the things it can control. We know there are policies that can help people who are desperate. We know there are critical services that can be improved. And so we do need to have more of a discussion about all of that. And we know that we're not publicising the resources that can help people more, and they're underutilised. And throwing new cash at an issue might seem like a solution, but if you're not clear on what that issue is, then it does beg the question. how responsible you are with taxpayers' money. The well-meaning intentions should remain, but financial management has a lot to be desired, so I cannot support this budget.
Councillor Sarah Kerr, please.
Thank you very much. My portfolio covers parts of the Place and Growth, Resource and Assets and Office of the CEO Directorates, and the common theme running through the budgetary contribution from my portfolio is investing to save. Improving the experience for our residents of interacting with the council is vital. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't, and the Customer Excellence Programme being developed strives to get it right first time for our residents, not only improving their experience, but reducing costs for us. The digital and IT teams are very much a part of this programme, with the introduction of a new website and CRM system soon to launch. By investing in these tools, we are reducing avoidable demand by getting things right first time and keeping our residents updated by having digital services that are fit for purpose, accessible and intuitive, freeing up resource for our residents who need non-digital engagement. We've also been able to make savings in this area through contract negotiations and investing in areas such as Teams telephony that then reduces hardware costs. Our library service is also very much part of our Customer Excellence Programme. We are proud to have invested ring-fenced capital expenditure in providing Twyford with its new permanent library, and it is a pleasure to work with our partner, the Polehampton Trust, on this. Libraries are at the heart of our communities, and through co-location, making them into community hubs, we can work with our partners to improve the offering further and reach out to new users through a more sustainable operating model. We're continuing to invest in our assets through making them more energy efficient, reducing operational costs, and investing in the generation of renewable energy, bringing in much needed finance to the organisation. As Barkham Solar Farm progresses, feasibility studies are being done on 2 further sites for renewable energy generation. No delays in this regard. But it's not all about us, and some of the investments being made help our residents to save, such as with the home improvements being made to our social housing stock. The launch of our home decarbonisation service this year will also help residents to invest in their homes for longer term savings while reducing the carbon footprint of the borough. I would like to end by highlighting the revision paper to the MTFP regarding the capital programme. The previous administration has tended to rebadge a number of items as climate emergency spend, such as food waste collection and greenways, to give the illusion that new action is being taken when it isn't. Many of the items in this area should be in their respective areas, such as environment and roads and transport, and this revision paper to the MTFP is to correct this. Tackling the climate emergency is the responsibility of everyone, and part of the embedding process is ensuring ownership across the organisation. I'd also like to add there is no Climate Citizens Assembly in the budget, so I'm not sure where that's come from. There isn't. Deliberative process is your deliberative process, and it's the end of that. There's no Citizens Assembly. The measure of success is not the amount of money being spent that gets plastered on an election leaflet, but immeasurable action to reduce our carbon emissions. Thank you.
Councillor Jackie Rance, please.
Okay.
Councillor Stuart Munro, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to sort of point out just 3 things. One, I think, is inflation has dropped 3rd consecutive month. Telegraph out to us. Yeah, but it says inflation fell more quickly than economists predicted. So we are in, I agree with you, Imogen, we are in unprecedented times. And also, the war in Ukraine hadn't even started when the 2022-23 budget was passed. The Budget Council was on the 17th and Russia invaded on the 24th. So you couldn't have predicted that. On Regeneration Town Centre last summer, the Council's Audit Committee found that the investments by the previous Conservative administration had delivered a strong financial return for taxpayers. At that time, there was a net financial benefit of £22.25 per household after borrowing costs had been taken into account. And Wokingham Town Centre regeneration created 249 million worth of assets from only 72 million of debt. As it's been said earlier, the Lib Dems previously opposed Elmsfield, now a huge success with the cinema, playground and the hub. And I think that, finally, I'd like to say that the Lib Dems' lack of business engagement on car parking is at best naive.
Councillor Paul Fishwick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. High on our risk register are local bus services. These are vital for Wokingham Borough and the wider area. They play an important role for people to access jobs, retail and services, schools, further education, business-to-business connectivity, visiting the hospital, health centres, as well as for leisure activities. They are a lifeline for the community and the economy and carry around 2.8 million passengers per annum. During the summer last year, under significant financial pressures, we invested 300,000 of additional money to retain supported local bus services. With no clear future funding support from central government, we wrote to the Secretary of State for Transport, highlighting this major issue. As the challenge to fund and maintain a financially sustainable network without central government assistance now rests with this council, local bus operators and our partners. However, we cannot wait around for government. Therefore, today, the executive have agreed to extend the contracts for a further 5 months to allow for retendering of these local bus services for a period of 3 years until August 2026, with additional funding of 827,000 per annum. This will provide some certainty for our residents that is vital for their day-to-day lives and vital for our local economy. We have also retained our highways maintenance budget against significant financial pressures. Nationally, across England and Wales, the latest annual local authorities road maintenance study found that there was a backlog of over £12.6 billion in local road repairs. We therefore call on government to invest to stop the local road network declining further. We were successful in being awarded funding to extend our electric vehicle charging points by another 38 units, and these will be installed by July this year. We now have a draft local cycle and walking infrastructure plan that, once approved by the executive in March, will be used to support bids for external funding from Active Travel England. That will assist us in the introduction of safer routes across the borough for people to use. That supports our emergency climate change objectives. Thank you.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to point out to Paul that in February 22, I actually set aside enough additional funding to support bus services for the year 22-23 as part of an executive paper. I'm glad he recognises this.
Sorry, can we just have a quick discussion, please? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You've had your 12 minutes. You shouldn't be speaking.
Ooh.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the domain.
Well, you shouldn't have called me then.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just taking advice. Thank you.
I don't make the rules up. I wait for the mayor to decide.
Sorry, Councillor Jorgensen, you only had 9 minutes on your original speech, so you're allowed 3 minutes only.
Thank you very much.
That's on
will be
advisement.
ample.
Thank you.
I'm glad that he recognises that, and we support his actions to increase the funding for buses. I'm disappointed that the Lib Lab budget makes unnecessary and unjustified cuts to universal services, which will damage local businesses and local residents. We provided options, but the Lib Labs won't listen. Despite asking for a waste business case last year, we've still seen no case to justify the changes, other than a couple of vague statements. No plan, no costs, no impact assessment, nothing. I have done several times, asked for it in November. I still haven't seen it. The contrary to claims, the previous budget pulls money from the revaluation reserve, which will have to be replaced. So to say it doesn't use money out of reserves is incorrect. We have requested a breakdown of reserves at Community and Corporate Scrutiny, and I'd like to thank Graham in advance for that. I think it will be very useful. We presented some clearly costed proposals, which we first brought our concerns to overview and scrutiny as a call-in the summer, and have continued to press for these changes. So to say this is a surprise is a bit unbelievable. We've provided funded options to protect universal services our residents value, but the Lib Dems and Labour are unwilling to listen to us or the residents.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Shenton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While the sport and leisure elements of my portfolio are vital to residents, capital constraints in the near term will impact their further development, and that will subsequently be informed by the ongoing review of our playing pitch strategy. Therefore, it is the environmental impact of our borough that I am now most keen to address. In July 2019, the previous administration declared a climate emergency, but persisted with an addiction to single-use plastic bags made from petrochemicals, ordering 10 to 12 million in each of 2019, 2020 and 2021. Roughly half were to line our food caddies, the other half destined to decorate our streets on Waste Collection Day in a fetching shade of blue. Perhaps they don't get the connection between climate emergency and single-use plastic. Inexplicably, they never created a budget for the caddy liners, never adding a growth item to the revenue budget, and hence when we assumed control and inherited no stock, it was a simple decision to start weaning the borough off specially made single-use plastic bags, while avoiding an unbudgeted cost of £120,000. The opposition fought us, but failed, and in their world we would still be throwing unbudgeted money at caddy liners that are ultimately burned and particulate matter. In this MTFP today, following extensive consultation, we propose to go further and introduce wheel bins for residual waste to replace the infamous blue bags that are also burnt. This will be accompanied by alternating the collection of dry recycling and residual waste alongside weekly food waste collections, so there will continue to be a weekly collection. And that method is already used by 85% of English councils. This method is also proven to encourage higher rates of recycling and reduction of residual waste volumes, offering a major improvement to the environmental impact of our household waste service. Significantly, in a full year, this Invest to Save initiative will reduce the annual cost of waste management by at least £1 million and carbon dioxide emissions by 2,400 tonnes. Although in the introductory year of 24-25, the saving could be a little less. Undoubtedly, the Conservatives are again fighting us every step of the way, quite predictably, as already shown in their misrepresentations on social media and their spurious petition. But we will continue to prioritise those most in need in our borough over the profits of plastic bag makers.
Councillor Charles Maggetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The budget in front of us tonight is consistent in its application of increased charges and cuts to universal resident services. When you look at the list of the so-called savings, certain things stand out. Ceasing the provision of blue bags, moving to 2 weekly waste collections, removal of discretionary concessions for transport to football matches, cancellation of food caddy liners, a reduction from 3 to 2 visits per year of weed spraying. There's also the real terms impact of the cut in road and pavement maintenance from freezing the cash fund for it, which will impact the entire borough. The increased charges then start. Increased to charge garden waste fees, off-street parking charges, moving traffic enforcement, on-street parking zones, parking permits. All of this appears under the savings column. However, I think if you asked any normal resident, they'd tell you that they weren't savings, they're just increases in costs and charges or reductions in service. On top of this, we've got the doubling of most car parking charges and the introduction of weekend and bank holiday car parking charges, a punitive increase which will hit residents hard. It will also hit the businesses in the town centre very hard at a time when they're all recovering from the costs of COVID. I note with a certain amount of irony there's a budget line for safer routes to school appearing in here. Yet I note that's quite strange when last month I tabled a motion for a safer route to school for Floriat Montague and the administration voted against it. And my colleague Parry Bath has been calling for a foot crossing outside Crossfield School in Shidfield, which again the administration won't support. During a cost of living crisis, the approach of this administration is to slash universal services and raise charges to all residents via stealth charges. This budget will make our residents poorer and reduce the amount of services on offer to them. The leader continually tells us how short the council is of money. However, when you look at the capital programme, it tells a different story. 1.2 million over 3 years for integrated transport schemes, 2.9 million on active travel over 3 years, 1.2 million on the next phase of the LC WIP, 60k for naturalisation and biodiversity, and 1.5 million on new foot and cycle structures. At the end of the day, it's all about choices. A Conservative administration would keep taxes lower and put money in residents' pockets so they can make their own decisions. It would not continue this approach of hidden taxes and charges, such as doubling of most parking charges when people are really stretched. It would not cut universal services which residents rely on. It would invest in key infrastructure such as roads and pavements which are used and benefit all residents. It would focus on efficiency and getting better value for money from the taxpayer rather than simply slapping charges on the residents. With this budget, the Liberal-led coalition has taken a clear approach: higher tax, higher spend. I won't support this, and for this reason, I'll be voting against it.
Councillor David Hare, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The positive that adult social care has got a budget settlement of 2%, as the government told us to, is downplayed by the fact that the revenue received, even though an increase of 5% on the ASC budget, is still well below the crippling inflationary phase and does little to address the years of central government underfunding of adult social care. Because of this underfunding, it is getting harder and harder to keep and attract staff at a time when the numbers and complexity of cases for ASC is increasing. In this difficult scenario, I would like to thank Matt Pope and his team for delivering in budget this year and all their hard work in setting another challenging but achievable budget. Like other services, we are, at Adult Social Care, investing to save. ASC has opened new specialist accommodation this year, providing homes for 30 people with care needs. As people know, we have planning permission to build a new care home for people with dementia. We have a dual approach, as we also looking to buy care homes, identifying cost-effective capital investments to reduce revenue spend. We provide many services to Optalis, where there's also a very positive ethos to be inventive in improving services while also bringing down costs. Optalis do this by sensible rationalisation of service provision, working with and in the community, building a positive developmental plan for care workers, investing financially in these care workers, as well as the use of appropriate technology. A development close to my heart is we have last recruited an autism lead to push forward the autism strategy this year. And it seems a small move, but I'm also delighted to have approved an additional £100,000 to support unpaid carers across the borough from April 2023. These people deserve all the support and encouragement we can give them. This continues our investment in the voluntary sector to prevent, reduce and delay the need for statutory support. This has been the first full year of the Charity and Community Hub, allowing holistic working to support vulnerable residents across many organisations. I thank this sector for its continued support. Adult social care punches well above its funding expectations. We will continue to look for efficiencies while increasing the quality of the service provided to all who need support.
Thank you. Councillor Norman Jorgensen, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Astonishing outburst, a spurious petition. I'm sure the people that signed the petition didn't feel it was spurious. We're here to represent people, and that was a bit of an outburst, I think. The Liberal leader of the council and the executive member for the environment told us last summer that waste collection had to be changed fortnightly or even less frequently to save money, and it had to be done right away. Well, here we are, some 7 months later, presented with a budget that proposes introducing such changes only in summer 2024, hardly in line with the feigned urgency projected by the Liberals last summer. Many of the Liberal Democrat councillors, who will no doubt be voting for this reduction in service tonight, had promised that they would keep weekly waste collections. For example, in his election leaflet of February 2018, Councillor David Hare claimed that the pressure from the Liberal Democrats had forced the Conservatives to keep weekly bin collections. Exhibit A. It was a dodgy claim then, and tonight it looks even more dodgy. The forecast cost of changing from the current weekly waste collection to fortnightly is currently around £2 million. This will be spent in this coming financial year, 2023-24. So in the short term, there will be a significant cost associated with the change. The Liberals propose this is funded from a Waste PFI Equalisation Fund reserve, currently earmarked for other things. This from the same bunch that objected to the Conservatives dipping into reserves to fund COVID recovery costs last year. Pots and black kettles and all that. If the council moves to fortnightly collection of waste in wheelie bins, I expect the pickup into the trucks will be significantly slower. Hence, the cost of the collection contract in future is likely to be higher. This has not been factored into the council's financial plan. I've been through the financial plan, and I've also got the paper for a scrutiny meeting next week. The one for Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. And there does seem to be inconsistencies in the values of some of the financial numbers between them. This in total, if I've read the papers correctly, amounts to a difference of about £800,000 between the two. £800,000 more cost to the medium-term financial plan, that is. So I'll check with Graham afterwards, but that's my reading of the papers. That's in terms of the call down on reserves and in the savings. The Conservatives have been asking for a detailed, robust business case for this proposed change for months, but to date, none has been provided. It seems there's a dogmatic desire to press on regardless of residents' wishes and costs. We will continue to challenge this proposal.
Jorgensen, you're out of time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Prue-Bray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Children's Services capital schemes include more care leaver accommodation, more secondary school places, and more special educational needs provision. We are responding to increasing demand where the council has statutory duties. The Conservatives before us, regrettably, failed to plan ahead adequately for any of these things. Now, to be fair to them, not all of the extra demand could have been foreseen, which is why recommendation 2 under the medium-term financial plan points out that the situation on secondary school places is still evolving. But for special educational needs, there are more issues than recent increased demand. Overspending in this area since 2017 will result in 16.5 million in accumulated deficit in the dedicated schools grant this year, which is the last year of Conservative budgeting. If this upward spiral were to continue, it would risk literally, and I mean literally, bankrupting the council within the next 5 years. I talked about the overspend in my budget speech last year when I was in opposition. The Conservatives knew about it, but they didn't do anything to tackle it. We are tackling it, but, and I cannot stress this enough, not just because of the money. We have to improve our SEND service for the sake of the children. We're not the worst performing local authority on SEND, but we can and should be better. We need more specialist provision locally, and we need better support for children. By supporting children more effectively and earlier, we will do better by the children, by their parents and the schools, but also save money. That's why we will be working with our partners in education and health and with parents and carers to completely overhaul SEND services. This is genuinely transformative for the service, and ultimately it will also transform the spending, gradually bringing it back into balance over the next few years. To enable this to happen in the long term, we need to invest now. And that's why we are committing 1% of council tax for it this year, with the intention being to do that for the next 5 years. I know everyone in this chamber cares about the borough's children, so I hope, therefore, that everyone will support this ambitious programme to improve our SEND service.
Councillor Stephen Conway, you reserved your right to speak. Do you wish to speak now?
I think I will, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. I have to say, Madam Mayor, if we were to extend the meeting until midnight, that still wouldn't give me enough time to try to correct the multiple falsehoods, half-truths, and misunderstandings of the opposition. So I will focus instead on why colleagues of all parties should support this budget. First, a reminder of the challenges officers and executive members have faced in building this budget. Challenges that I'm afraid the opposition seem willfully to ignore. Double-digit inflation, rising demand, especially in children's and adult services, and interest rate rises, courtesy of the disastrous Truss government, have created a financial crisis that's driven many councils to the point of collapse. In our case, those pressures have been increased by significant shortfalls in the revenue anticipated by our predecessors in last year's budget, and by the lowest level of support from central government that any unitary authority receives. But by facing up to the challenges and being prepared to make tough decisions, we have produced a balanced budget. This is a sound and responsible budget. Through savings and income generation, we have found the money to fund services without dipping into the general fund balances. Indeed, we have begun the process of rebuilding those balances after our predecessors raided them to cover their ongoing expenditure in last year's budget. This is a forward-looking budget. We have sought to invest to save in the future, taking a longer-term perspective. You can see this in our work on tackling the climate emergency, in planning for extra school places and improved SEND provision, and in preparing for expensive changes in adult social care. And this is a compassionate budget. We have sought to help those who most need help. We have put more money into the council tax reduction scheme. We have increased the funds available to help residents cope with the cost of living crisis. And I have to say, I'm flabbergasted to hear the opposition think this is unnecessary. We have committed to providing bus subsidies for the next 3 years. We have kept council house rents below the government cap and put money aside to help tenants in difficulties. Madam Mayor, I want to echo the leader's thanks to our officers and executive colleagues for all their hard work on this budget. And I want to thank the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee for its probing challenges as the budget was developing. I commend it to Council as sound and responsible, forward-looking and compassionate. I hope all councillors will support it.
Before we move to a recorded vote, the leader has a right to reply. Councillor Jones, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. In summing up tonight's budget, I would like to concentrate my comments on the Liberal Democrats' prudent, forward-looking and compassionate budget, our first for 20 years. We have presented a balanced budget for 2023-24 in both revenue and capital budgets, managing to do this despite enormous financial challenges of inflation at 10%, rising demand for all of our services, especially children's services and adult social care. We have done this without dipping into the general fund balance, in stark contrast to the Conservatives who dipped into it last year by taking 2.3 million from it to balance the books for 2022-23. The Liberal Democrat budget is an investment now, save later budget, especially true for our climate emergency initiatives and planning for extra school places. We are reviewing all our contracts to make sure they are providing value for money and to find ways to extract savings through new IT systems that enable us to manage contracts more easily. The Liberal Democrat budget, as Stephen has said, is a compassionate budget. We have earmarked 1% of the council tax increase to increase spending on children's services, 2% to increase adult social care spending, where it will support members of our community who have significant day-to-day challenges that make life a struggle. We have put more money into the council tax reduction scheme. We have created a fund to help those experiencing considerable hardship during the cost of living crisis. We have found the money to continue subsidising much needed bus services for the next 3 years and kept council rents down below the government cap. It is only right and proper that we help those in need where we can. That's one of the reasons for many of us being councillors. Under this administration, that is exactly what we will do. I urge all councillors to support this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I will now move to a recorded vote on the recommendations contained in each of the 4 budget reports. Please note that members do not have to request a recorded vote on this item, as a recorded vote is a requirement on all motions and amendments on the budget. First of all, we have the recommendations contained in the Housing Revenue Account 2023 to 24. Report on page 47, recommendations 1 to 7. I request that Chief Executive takes a recorded vote, and please note revised recommendations on supplementary paper is on your desk. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move to the vote in terms of the HRA report. Councillor Sam Akhtar, 4 against, all. Councillor Parry Bath.
4.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth.
4.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal.
4.
Councillor Chris Bowring.
4.
Councillor Shirley Boyd.
4.
Councillor Prue Bray.
4.
Councillor Rachel Burgess.
4.
Councillor Anne Chadwick.
4.
Councillor Stephen Conway.
4.
Councillor David Cornish.
4.
Councillor Andy Croy. Councillor David Davis.
4.
Councillor Peter Dennis.
4.
Councillor Lindsay Ferris.
4.
Councillor Michael Firmiger.
4.
Councillor Paul Fishwick.
4.
Councillor Jim Fruin.
4.
Councillor Maria G.
4.
Councillor David Hare.
4.
Councillor Peter Harper.
4.
Councillor Pauline Hello-Simons.
4.
Councillor Graham Howe.
4.
Councillor Chris Johnson.
4.
Councillor Clive Jones.
4.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Sarah Kerr.
4.
Councillor Tahir Maher.
4.
Councillor Morag Malvern.
4.
Councillor Charles Magetz.
4.
Councillor Rebecca Magetz.
4.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
4.
Councillor Andrew Mickleborough.
4.
Councillor Stuart Monroe.
4.
Councillor Alistair Neal.
4.
Councillor Jackie Rance.
4.
Councillor Beth Rowland.
4.
Councillor Ian Shenton.
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
4.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
Four.
Councillor Mike Smith.
4.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
4.
Councillor Bill Soane.
4.
Councillor Alison Swaddle.
4.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
4.
That's carried. We're now moving on to the next recommendation contained in the Capital Programme and Strategy 2023-26 report on page 57, recommendations 1 to 4. Can we please have a recorded vote?
Councillor Akhtar.
Against.
Councillor Bath.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Bishop Firth.
4.
Councillor Blumenthal.
Against.
Councillor Bowring.
Against.
Councillor Boyt.
4.
Councillor Bray.
4.
Councillor Burgess.
4.
Councillor Chadwick.
Against.
Councillor Conway.
4.
Councillor Cornish.
4.
Councillor Croy.
4.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dennis.
4.
Councillor Ferris.
4.
Councillor Firmiger.
Against.
Councillor Fishwick.
4.
Councillor Fruin.
4.
Councillor G.
4.
Councillor Hare.
4.
Councillor Harper.
Against.
Councillor Hellier Simons.
Against.
Councillor Howe.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
4.
Councillor Maher.
4.
Councillor Malvern.
4.
Councillor Charles Magetts.
Against.
Councillor Rebecca Magetts.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
4.
Councillor Mickleborough.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
Against.
Councillor Neal.
4.
Councillor Rance.
Against.
Councillor Rowland.
4.
Councillor Shenton.
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bay.
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Bay.
4.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
4.
Councillor Mike Smith.
4.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
Against.
Councillor Bill Soane.
Against.
Councillor Alison Swaddle.
Against.
Councillor Yunus.
Against.
The recommendation is carried. Thank you. We're now moving on to recommendation in the Treasury Management Strategy 2023-26 report on page 98, recommendations 1 to 2. Would like to take a recorded vote, please.
Councillor Akhtar.
4.
Councillor Bath.
4.
Councillor Bishop Firth.
4.
Councillor Blumenthal.
4.
Councillor Bowring.
4.
Councillor Boyt.
4.
Councillor Bray.
4.
Councillor Burgess.
4.
Councillor Chadwick.
4.
Councillor Conway.
4.
Councillor Cornish.
4.
Councillor Croy.
4.
Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Dennis.
4.
Councillor Ferris.
4.
Councillor Firmiger.
4.
Councillor Fishwick.
4.
Councillor Fruin.
4.
Councillor G.
Abstain.
Councillor Hare.
4.
Councillor Harper.
4.
Councillor Hellier Simons.
4.
Councillor Howe.
4.
Councillor Johnson.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Jorgensen, Norman Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Kerr.
4.
Councillor Maher.
4.
Councillor Malvern.
4.
Councillor Magetts.
4.
Councillor Rebecca Maggetts.
4.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
4.
Councillor Andrew Mickleby.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
4.
Councillor Neal.
4.
Councillor Rance.
4.
Councillor Rowland.
4.
Councillor Shenton.
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Debay.
4.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
4.
Councillor Mike Smith.
4.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
4.
Councillor Bill Soane.
4.
Councillor Swaddle.
4.
Councillor Eunice.
4.
Recommendation carried. We're now moving on to the recommendations contained in the medium-term financial plan 2023-26, which includes the revenue budget submission 2023-24 on page 141, recommendations 1 to 4. Please can we have a recorded vote?
Councillor Akhtar.
Against.
Councillor Bath.
Against.
Councillor Bishop Firth.
4.
Councillor Blumenthal.
Against.
Councillor Bowring.
Against.
Councillor Boyt.
4.
Councillor Bray.
4.
Councillor Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Burgess.
4.
My apologies, that was a cough and I thought I heard my name. My apologies, that wasn't me. Please go back.
Councillor Chadwick.
Against.
Sorry, can I ask for Councillor Chadwick again, please?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Conway.
4.
Councillor Cornish.
4.
Councillor Croy.
4.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dennis.
4.
Councillor Ferris.
4.
Councillor Firmager.
Against.
Councillor Fishwick.
4.
Councillor Fruin.
Abstain.
Councillor G.
4.
Councillor Hare.
4.
Councillor Harper.
Against.
Councillor Helly Sounds.
Against.
Councillor Howe.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
4.
Councillor Maher.
4.
Councillor Malvern.
4.
Councillor Charles Maggetts.
Against.
Councillor Rebecca Maggetts.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
4.
Councillor Mickleby.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
Against.
Councillor Neal.
4.
Councillor Rance.
Against.
Councillor Rowland.
4.
Councillor Shenton.
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Debay.
4.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
4.
Councillor Mike Smith.
4.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
Against.
Councillor Bill Soane.
Against.
Councillor Alison Swaddle.
Against.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
Against.
Recommendations carried. Thank you. Thank you. We're now moving on to 109, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 2022-23. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debray. And do you have a seconder? Thank you, Clive Jones. Thank you. Would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report covers the first 6 months of 22-23 financial year and is presented as part of our monitoring process. The report has been reviewed by our audit committee and all of the approved indicators have been achieved except for internal borrowing, as this is quite high at the moment. It is, however, better to be borrowing internally than externally, which would have an interest rate of 1.56%. And this indicator is due to be reviewed anyway. The council is trying to reduce its external borrowing and therefore will reduce its external debt levels. Overall, our borrowing is lower than expected due to the reprofiling of some of our capital projects, limiting our work to the most necessary projects as it's a better way to manage our budget and spending, especially in these unpredictable times. The income generated from these funds equates to £15.29 per council tax band D property. With all of these things, there is an element of risk involved, and there are concerns around the minimum revenue provision. But for the 6 months that this report covers, it seems to be going quite well. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against this report? Thank you. So now we can go straight to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Abstain? Recommendations are carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item the energy contract procurement. Members are asked to note that this item contains some exempt information on page 183. If members wish to refer to this information, they must indicate this to me. I'm required to move this into a private session. Thank you. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Sarah Kerr. And do you have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to speak for 3 minutes?
Thank you very much. Just before I begin, I just want to highlight a tweak in one of the recommendations. It's recommendation 4, which is on page 273 of your agenda. It says about delegating authority to the Director of Resources and Assets in consultation with the executive members for finance and contracts. That should be finance and housing. Just to be clear, contracts falls under Councillor Stephen Conway. So there is that small change to that recommendation. It pretty much sums up what's going on in this report in the statement that it says it will enable cost avoidance over the MTFP inflation position and help with our response to the climate emergency. By moving from CCS to laser, they have substantially more green energy that they can provide for us. And this is done under the REGO contracts, which are the Renewable Energy Guarantees of Origin. So they are actually able to demonstrate with those contracts those proven green energy sources, which is significantly better than what we've currently got with CCS. There are other risks of staying with CCS, which includes reduction in economies of scale. Because of the flexibility and the increased opportunities to procure green energy from laser, more and more local authorities are moving away from CCS. So with that reduction of economies of scale, it actually takes the price up over the long term. It's also inflexible in a volatile market. So they buy 100% of their energy in advance. Laser purchase 70% of their energy in advance, and 30% they do through spot buying, which makes it more agile. And over time, they're going to be able to offer things like time of use tariffs, variable pricing. So this, in effect, allows us to have cost avoidance in here with inflation going up later on. This was supposed to come to executive in October and then subsequently to council. The reason why it's been delayed is because of the government announcement of financial aid packages for businesses on their energy. And at that moment in time, it wasn't clear if we would still be eligible if we moved from CCS to lasers. So we've waited to make sure it's fine, and we're continuing to review any government announcements. This is pretty straightforward stuff, more green energy and cost avoidance in the long term. So hopefully everyone can support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the recommendation? Thank you. We'll move to the vote. Those for? Any against? Any abstentions? Recommendations carried. Thank you very much. Can I say thank you very much? The meeting has now finished, and thank you for all your cooperation. Thank you and good night.